in the lively town of Kofi, where traders shouted their prices and customers haggled from dawn till dusk, one woman's food stall remained strangely quiet. Mama Yeti, a robust woman in her late 40s, had been selling Amala for years. Her stall was tucked into a corner of the bustling marketplace, and although her Amala was prepared with care, it never seemed to attract many buyers. Every day she would sit by her pot, watching other food vendors with long lines of customers while her own fire crackled idly. Frustration gnawed at her heart. Her dream was to be known far and wide as the best Amala seller in Kofi, but each passing day felt like a step closer to failure. One late afternoon, as Mama Yeti was packing up her unsold food, she overheard a conversation between two women sitting nearby. They spoke in hushed tones about an herbalist who could grant anyone success. "They say people go to him when they have no hope left," one woman said. "He knows things. He can change your fortune." Mama Yeti's ears perked up. Desperate and curious, she decided she would seek out this herbalist. She could no longer bear watching her competitors flourish while her business withered away. That night, she could hardly sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of what the herbalist could do for her. Before the sun had even risen, Mama Yeti set off on her journey. The path to the herbalist's hut was shrouded in mystery. It lay deep within the forest, past winding trails and dense thickets. The further she walked, the quieter the world became, until the sounds of the market and the town behind her disappeared entirely. After hours of trekking, she finally spotted the hut, barely visible behind the thick trees. It was small and unassuming, with smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Mama Yeti took a deep breath and knocked on the wooden door. It creaked open almost immediately, revealing a man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to pierce through her. He gestured for her to enter without a word. The interior of the hut was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of herbs and something unfamiliar, something darker. The herbalist sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes never leaving hers. After a long silence, he spoke. "What brings you to my door?" His voice was low, like the rumble of distant thunder. Mama Yeti swallowed hard and explained her predicament. The lack of customers, the slow death of her business, and the hopelessness that had driven her here. The herbalist listened patiently, his face expressionless. When she finished, he stood up slowly and motioned for her to follow him to the back of the hut. There, in the dim light of the fire, the herbalist began mixing strange herbs and powders into a pot. He chanted words in a language Mama Yeti didn't recognize, his voice rising and falling like the wind. After several minutes, he stopped abruptly and turned to her. "If you wish for success, there is a price you must pay," he said gravely. Mama Yeti nodded quickly. She was prepared to do anything. "The wound on your leg," he continued, pointing to the sore that had been festering for months. "That wound holds your essence. It is part of you. Every morning you must wash the wound, and the water you collect use it to cook your Amala." Mama Yeti recoiled in horror. The thought of using the water from her wound to prepare food was repulsive, but the herbalist's eyes bore into hers, and she could feel the weight of his words. "If you do this, your stall will be flooded with customers," he said, his voice heavy with promise. "But you must never let anyone discover what you are doing. If they do, your success will turn to ruin." After a moment of hesitation, Mama Yeti agreed. She left the hut with a small bottle of powder the herbalist had given her, meant to keep the wound from healing too quickly. As she made her way back through the forest, the words of the herbalist echoed in her mind. The weight of her decision pressed down on her, but the thought of success was too tempting to resist. The next morning, just before dawn, Mama Yeti began her new routine. She sprinkled the powder on her wound, cringing as it stung, and then washed the sore with water, collecting it in a small bowl. With trembling hands, she poured the water into the pot of Amala she was preparing. The aroma that rose from the pot was unlike anything she had ever smelled before, rich, intoxicating, irresistible. By mid-morning, something incredible happened. People began to flock to her stall, drawn by the mouth-watering scent of her Amala. At first it was a few curious customers, but soon word spread throughout the town. By noon, there was a long line of people eagerly waiting to taste her food. Her pot emptied faster than she could prepare more, and for the first time in her life, Mama Yeti felt the thrill of success. Every day the crowds grew larger, and soon people from nearby villages were coming just to taste the famous Amala of Kofi. But with success came suspicion. Her workers, who had been with her since the beginning, couldn't understand the sudden change in fortune. One of her longest-serving workers, a young woman named Tinu, grew particularly curious. Tinu had always been sharp-eyed, and she noticed that every morning, before anyone else arrived, Mama Yeti would sneak off to a secluded area behind the market. No one knew what she did there, but she always returned just in time to start cooking. Tinu's curiosity soon turned into suspicion. She began to wonder what Mama Yeti was doing every morning before the market opened. One day she decided to follow her. Early one morning, just as the sky was beginning to lighten, Tinu trailed behind Mama Yeti, staying far enough away that she wouldn't be noticed. She watched as Mama Yeti disappeared behind a group of trees near the market. Hidden behind a large bush, Tinu peeked out, her eyes widening in horror at what she saw. There, sitting on the ground, was Mama Yeti, unwrapping the bandages from her leg. The wound was ghastly raw and oozing, covered in pus. Tinu watched, frozen in shock, as Mama Yeti dipped a cloth into the water she had brought with her and began to wash the wound, collecting the filthy water in a bowl. Tinu's heart raced as the truth dawned on her. The secret to Mama Yeti's success was the water from her wound. The very same water she used to prepare the Amala that people were now flocking to taste. Tinu felt sick to her stomach, her hands trembling as she watched. Just as Mama Yeti finished her ritual, Tinu couldn't hold back any longer. Her voice erupted in a terrified scream. "Ha!